Hello and welcome back to video 3 in this series about how to write, illustrate and publish your children's storybook for free. This third video is on illustrations. Now, this might come as a shock to some of you, but since the title of this series of videos is how to write, illustrate and publish your children's storybook for free, that means that you, yes you, are doing the illustrations. Now some of you will go, I can't draw, I can't even do a stick man. Now stop that. Got a hand, put it up. What's this? What's this, people? This is an opposable thumb. And that means that, like the cavemen before you, you can draw. Because it means you can pick up and hold and make marks with a crayon, a brush. Okay, I haven't got any paint on that brush, but you know what I mean. Or a pencil, or indeed a pen. You might not be able to draw at this stage like Leonardo da Vinci, but what about Quentin Blake, Raymond Briggs and Roger Hargreaves? They are all superstar illustrators and all extremely different. So whatever you may think, whatever your head may be telling you, you can draw. If you want to do something badly enough, you have to just practice at it. It may be hard work, it may be frustrating at times, but you can do it. I'm going to share a little secret with you. It took me 4 attempts to pass my driving test. But to me, that was freedom. So I was just going to keep trying and trying and trying until I passed it. And I'm pleased to report that eventually I did. And I love driving. I think that frustration comes, though, going back to illustrations, when you can't draw on paper what you see in your head. For some reason, people think you either can draw or you can't, that you should automatically be able to immediately start creating what you see in your mind's eye. That's not the case. You have to practice. You learn to draw in the same way that I learned how to drive. If you're really stuck, though, wait till you get to the end of the video. And I'm going to revisit this. I think the important thing to recognise here is that you need to find your own style. Don't just copy what you see other people doing. Explore what other people do. By all means, be inspired by it, but find your own unique style. You will have one. I think the important thing is just to have fun, play with it and see something will speak to you, some particular style will appeal to you and you'll think, that is me, that's what I'm about. And it may be different for each book, presuming you do more than one, each book that you create. But just play with it, have fun with it, and you will find something that eventually goes, I'm the one for you. One thing I think it is really important and helpful to master is emotions and faces. And I don't mean faces like, an image that looks like my face. I mean expressions. And we've all got, actually, on our phones, really, really good examples of basic faces. If you look at emojis or emoticons. So I would urge you just to go back to really basic, eyes, eyebrows, nose and mouth, to just have a look to see if you can create different expressions of anger, fear, enjoyment, fun, joy. Have a go and play with it. Again, this is a creative process, and creativity, well, can be a serious endeavour. I think there's a joy to be had here. Whatever your drawing ability, I think one thing that everyone has to consider is, what is your medium going to be? Is it going to be photography? Are you going to use AI, watercolours, acrylics, pencils? It's almost limitless. And also don't forget, you can have a mashup between those different media. I think my advice is simply try them out, make marks with different ones and just which one feels right to you. Which one feels right to you for the story that you're illustrating now? One of them will, I hope, resonate with you. It might be different for each story that you create. As I said earlier, it might be that what appeals to you is a mashup between two different styles. Initially, I was thinking, because I was very short on time, I would use some holiday photographs I'd taken for the background and then just sort of insert photographs of the crocodile and Lottie, or just do them by some form of line drawing. But actually, it became too complicated because you should not use faces or real people or real children if you don't have their permission, or in the case of children, their parents' permission. So to be honest, I would just completely steer clear of that. I think it's a complete minefield. Just use drawings or paintings. I ended up using the photographs that Lottie's mum had sent me and making my own drawings and subsequently paintings from them. So they were of Lottie, but they weren't photographs and probably not recognisable, if I'm completely honest. Although sort of little snippets of them were sort of vaguely recognisable, and that was sufficient because she would know herself in the picture book. My book was very personal, so I created it using watercolours, well, drawings, then watercolours, and then I used a pen to go over some of the details. But I wanted to have that personal connection with it because I know Lottie, and I wanted her to, I wanted this to be a very personal and loving gift for my great niece. So once you've considered which medium you're going to use, the next thing you have to consider is what, I'm sliding off this stool, what paper you're going to use. Now for me, because I was in great haste, I realised I wouldn't have time to laboriously tape down each piece of paper and paint it. So I think I invented a thing called multi-painting, where basically I just painted everything all at the same time. So I wasn't taping anything down, and in order to do that I had to pick a paper that wasn't going to cockle, which is where it sort of bubbles like that when you get it wet. So I used 350 GSM, which means something to people who are familiar with different types of art paper. But if you are painting more slowly than me and you are doing it probably the correct way of taping each piece of paper down, you don't need paper that thick. There's a very good YouTube video detailing all different types of paper, which I'm not going to go into here, but I'll put a link for it up here. I think it actually comes out up here for you from Karen Rice. So the bonus for me with multi-painting, I can't not laugh at that, is that firstly it gets done really quickly because you're literally painting everything at the same time. Secondly, your colours are consistent, so I would mix up one colour for skin tone and then I would paint all the faces, and then I would come back and do colours for the crocodile, and I would paint all of the crocodiles going across, which is something that if you're not multi-painting you have to be consistent with. And the other big bonus for me was the other big bonus for me, because I am not a patient person, was that I didn't have to sit and wait for paint to dry. So as well as the thickness of your paper, you also have to consider the dimensions of your paper. So are you intending to have square pages or rectangular pages for your book? If you are thinking you're going to have square pages, as I did for Lottie and the Croc, be aware that of course if you're doing a double page spread and your picture is going to, and mine only goes 2/3 of the way across, but if you're going to go all the way across, that shape is a rectangle. So whatever paper you're using needs to be that sort of shape. And do bear in mind, I know that you can, obviously, if you've got a rectangular painting like this, you can enlarge it or contract it once you have it as a digital image. But if you use a square image like this, If you expand it, you'll lose some of the detail around the edges, and also you might find that it loses some of the detail in the expansion. If you contract it, you'll sort of end up with white gaps in places. So do bear that in mind if you're using, particularly if you want square pages but you want double page spreads of the pictures, that actually you need to have painting paper or drawing paper which is about the same dimensions as 2 pages, which will be a sort of wide rectangle. I hope that makes sense. So if you're not sure what dimensions you want your book to be, go to a children's library section or a children's book section in a bookshop, and just pick up a few books and open them up and see what they look like, see what they feel like, and pick one that suits your story and that you feel comfortable with. I know it sounds a bit bonkers, but it will actually, you'll find that there is a particular there's a particular book that speaks to you and says this is the right size for your story. You'll just feel it. I'm sure you'll just feel it. Right, let's now go on to actually starting to illustrate your book rather than talking about materials and preparation. Have a look at your storyboards and see what ideas you had for the illustrations. So let me refer to my Lottie book, if you don't mind. So in my first illustration, I had Lottie walking along by the riverbank, and I got carried away. I did lots of, water reflections, trees on the other bank, etc., etc. And then I did Lottie meeting the crocodile, and then I realised that actually I was going to have to reproduce all of this here, but from a slightly different angle, because she'd now walked past this plant here. It's got a bit thinner there, but and then page 3, again, same scenery. So this was, I've realised, to my dismay, because I was short of time, a huge amount of painting with all these water reflections, which I did wish I hadn't got quite so carried away with in page 1. So for me, because of the parameter of shortness of time, this was a bit of a drawback, and so after this page I started doing a bit less background. So my next page was they were in the park, which I just did a few trees for. And actually I did do some background for the next bit, which was the beach. But then by the time I got to this page where they're just meeting up for a drink, as you can see, the background became very simple and easy to do. But the point I was initially making here, apart from, if you haven't got a lot of time, don't make your background too detailed, is that you have to have continuity. So it's rather like if you're watching a film, if somebody has their hair up in one scene, then they need to have their hair up in the next shot of that scene. So here, for example, Lottie always has her hair up and she's wearing the same clothes in these, and the pictures are, they have continuity because they have the same details. Here she's walked past this plant, she's walked past this plant here, she's now by the rock in both, so there is continuity, even though those scenes are from different perspectives. So another thing you need to consider is not only continuity, but consistency, which means the same things in different pictures need to remain the same. So for example, Lottie always has her hair up in this ponytail, and not because she would every single day have her hair up in a ponytail, but it consistently identified her as that character, and the scale of size between the two characters is always the same wherever they are. And Lottie's hair is always the same colour. It wouldn't make sense if, for example, she went from being a blonde to a brunette, because then it starts to makes you question, is that the same character? Now for me that was a lot easier, because with multi-painting I'm sorry, but it just sounds ridiculous, but it does amuse me. With multi-painting, I was able to mix the colours up once, and then as I'm painting all the pictures at the same time, the colours remained consistent. But if you are not multi-painting, if you're doing them one at a time, then make yourself up a little separate palette, a little separate reference sheet, so that you put a daub of whichever colour you're using, so you can practice when you're painting a fresh painting that you have the same colour. I hope that makes sense. So in a children's picture book, the most important thing is think of it like going to see a film. And the big epithet in filming is show, don't tell. The pictures that you create are effectively the film, and the voice of the adult reading the story is the soundtrack. So if you can see it in the picture, you don't need to say it in the text. So for example, here we have a nice landscape scene. She's walking along by the river, she's wearing an orangey t-shirt. So this tells me a lot about Lottie already, and she has a child's proportions. You can see that she's not an adult. So if you can see it in the picture, then you don't need to say it in the text. So I don't need to say in the text that she's got this orangey t-shirt on, or she's got her hair in a ponytail, or she's walking along by the river sitting on a rock, whatever. But the one thing that you can't see in a picture is conversation. So in a children's storybook, it is usually the conversation that you will be adding in the text to nudge the story along. And actually we'll revisit this when we come to the next video, where we add the illustrations and story together, and you'll see how you can put the text in Canva so that the whole thing comes in together. Sometimes it's nice to add extra little details just for the fun. So for example, if I'd had more time here, I might do a little fish leaping out of the water, or a little squirrel being a bit nosy here. And what you could do is sort of almost by way of a subplot, have this little squirrel turning up here and there throughout the book, just for fun really. So in a children's storybook there is a dialogue always between illustrations and text to enable the story to be told. And the thing to do in a children's storybook is let the pictures do the heavy lifting. And this can be by expressions on children's faces. So for example, I hope this one expresses sort of fondness and friendship, together with the hug, which is the body language. And for example, in this one, where Lottie is showing the crocodile the cave that she's found for him, he doesn't say anything, but I think you can tell, even looking from the back, from his body language, that is surprise and delight. Well, I hope you can anyway. So even language sometimes, you can create, even language sometimes in body language, you can reveal what people are saying, or indeed in this one, what people are thinking, where the crocodile is thinking about an echidna or a pygmy possum, which are animals in Australia which hibernate. If you want to show the passage of time, very often you can show this. I haven't done this in my book, but for example, you can show it by illustrating different seasons or change of clothes. In my book, I showed it by change of perspective. So this is where Lottie is waiting for the crocodile to stop hibernating and come out of the cave. So I did it by perspective. So the further away she is geographically is indicative of the further back she is in time. So she's been waiting and she gets a bit closer, and then she's sort of like present day where she's really fed up waiting. And here I had her blowing what we call a dandelion clock, which is a dandelion flower which has gone to seed. And as children, you always call them dandelion clocks, and you blow them and the little things blow away. But sort of clock as in tick-tock, still waiting. Maybe a bit too subtle for a children's book, but might be of interest to the adult reading it. And here, where she's up to present day, and she's really sort of arms crossed, fed up and frustrated. And this brings me on to another thing, which is that your illustrations can really help your adult readers, so that when whoever is reading this book gets to this part where Lottie's going to say, "Oh Dylan, are you ever coming out?" this body language and this little face will say that the way she says it is, "Oh Dylan, are you ever coming out?" She is frustrated and she is fed up waiting. And while I'm sure there are lots of other things I could tell you, the most important thing for any children's book, of course, is to have a happy and joyful ending, which I hope this picture encapsulates. So at this stage you might think to yourself, well, I can write a children's storybook, but I just can't illustrate it, or vice versa. The important thing here is that you have choices. You can practice and learn the skill that you feel you fall short in, or you can change your ideas about the text or illustrations so that they fit your skill set, or you could engage somebody else to work with you, either as a writer or an illustrator. And I will revisit that in the final video in this series, which I think is going to be number 6. The most important takeaway from this video, which is about illustrating, is just really enjoy it. Really enjoy breathing life into the story that you have in your head, in your heart. And don't give up. Remember me and my driving test. You will get there in the end. I'll see you in the next video, which is about how we put things together in Canva, balancing illustrations and text. And then you'll really see your storybook coming together. I'll see you next time.